It's for real.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Go Ready Network. I'm Adelia. I'm here with my buddy Josh. And this month, we are talking about the 2020 Star Wars Twitch tournament. Josh, how are you doing today?
Doing good. It's March, and for everyone who knows, it's the college basketball season, and it feels fitting that we're talking about the Star Wars tournament when we're right now in the biggest bracket tournament season of
March
the
Madness,
year.
baby.
March Madness. I hope your bracket's doing better than mine, Adelia, because mine has not been good this year.
Mine is doing surprisingly okay. I knew nothing about college basketball this year and just picked, and so far I'm doing all right.
I feel like it feels it's better to not know sometimes than to know just for college.
Yeah.
But speaking of tournaments, we're talking about the Star Wars one, and that's another time when my bracket was completely busted when I made a Star Wars tournament bracket.
Yeah, I don't think I made a bracket for this tournament when it happened, but I remember being really excited that we were going to have this tournament and it was going to be live on Twitch, which was something the Schmoedown had never done before. They'd done live broadcasts on YouTube, but never Twitch. And I remember being really interested in seeing how this format was going to work, and it got tested in the very first match.
Yes.
So let's start talking about, first off, let's name the contestants who were in this tournament. We had Andres Cabrera representing Swag. We had Molly Damon representing the Usual Suspects. We had Andrew DeMolanta representing the Finstock Exchange. Laura Kelly was there for Corruption. Ken Knapsack for the Burning Droogs, if you remember that the Burning Droogs existed. Josh Covedo for the Rockstars. Joseph Scrimshaw for the Quirky Mercs. Sean Sullivan for the Den. And Adam Witt for the Dungeon. We had a play-in match to start this off between Andres Cabrera and Josh Covedo. I had never heard of Josh Covedo before this match. I knew Ace, obviously, from watching the Schmoedown and Schmoes Know and all that. What did you remember from this play-in match?
So I remember a lot of the circumstance of it because Josh Covedo was originally on the Burning Droogs. The Burning Droogs had 2 Star Wars players, and the Rockstars had Alex Damon, but Damon can't compete in the tournament. So Damon,
he's the champion at the time.
Yes. So because of that, the Rockstars technically had none. So there was a trade made. I don't remember the specifics of the trade. Might have been like
I think
a late
Roxy got draft pick.
Yeah, it feels like that's something that might have happened, where it was like a late draft pick for Covedo or a lower drafted player or something like that. I don't remember.
I don't remember a player exchange.
I think it was a draft pick as well, but I'm not 100% sure. But Covedo got traded to the Rockstars, so the Rockstars have a representative in the tournament. And Andres Cabrera, like what I felt like going into this match was Andres Cabrera had a very interesting Schmoedown history coming into this match. Not only was he a part of the only 3-team event, a 3-person team
trio,
yes, but also he was right coming off. I think like a match or two ago, we saw him get absolutely destroyed by Robert Parker. So
that was earlier in the year in Inner Geekdom.
Yes.
Parker just absolutely destroyed him, 23-8.
Yes, and so like after seeing him get 8 points in an Inner Geekdom match, it felt like, okay, Star Wars is way more specific than Inner Geekdom. It's a division that Inner Geekdom's much easier to break into. Once we talk about the competitors in this tournament in each round, this was the whole Star Wars division at this point, basically. There's very few Star Wars competitors, if any, that were left out of this tournament. And I think it shows you that, like, you can argue basically Ken Knapsack was the top seed, basically, of this tournament. And at this point, I believe he's around 1-3.
Yes.
Like, none of there's only one player. I'm trying to read it. I know Sean Sullivan had a winning record. And I think he may have been the only competitor that had a winning record heading into this tournament, which is funny because he's given one of the hardest matchups, and he is the only competitor with a winning record in the tournament. And I'll talk about that in a sec. But after seeing that match in Interregnum where Cabrera struggled so much, it really felt like, well, Quevedo's an unknown. We've seen Cabrera, and he hasn't been impressive in either of his Schmoedown debuts. So I felt pretty confident that Quevedo was going to win in that moment. And it was a big surprise, I remember, when Andres won and he performed so well. It was very promising. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So that's the initial memories I have of that match. I remember there were some technical difficulties, I believe, at one point during the Twitch stream. Is that correct? Or
I don't remember if there was technical difficulties of the Twitch stream. What I remember the most about this match is in the third round, when Josh Quevedo was answering his questions, trying to avoid the TKO. He originally said Ki Avi Mundi or something different for the answer to his 3-point
that's what I'm
question.
thinking of. Yes.
And they accepted it at the time, and then he missed his 5 and Andres won by TKO.
Yes.
If you go back and watch the match, because I did watch this part just to make sure I got the right question in my head, the match is edited on YouTube, and Christian comes on at the beginning and says, yeah, the end's edited because there was a call that we reversed, and so we made this show the correct result of the match. And at least they admitted to that, but he's like, yeah, if you watch this live on Twitch, this is not what you saw on Twitch.
Yes, that's what I remembered. I remember there was some snafu, but I couldn't remember the nature of it.
Yeah, that's what it was. It's Ki Addy Mundi, and he said Ki Avi Mundi or something similar to that. I couldn't quite make out exactly what he said, but it was not Addy. And I remember there being a big conversation about that right after that match had ended on Twitch, being like, that shouldn't have been accepted. Andres should have won right then. And then they reversed it, and Christian put out a tweet saying they'd reversed that call.
Yeah, and it's easier to do that when it's like the difference between winning by TKO or just winning.
Yeah.
Like, if this was like, I think it would have been a much more difficult call if Andres ended up losing because of that. But he didn't. And it's interesting because the winner of this play-in goes on to play Ken Knapsack. And do you want to move on to the first round matchups?
Yeah, let's move on to the first round matchups, which are essentially the quarterfinals, because by that point there was only 8 people in the tournament.
Yeah. So what's interesting about the way this bracket's formatted is that it's really surprising about how the matchups felt out, because usually the play-in game will play the number 1 seed in a way.
Yeah.
So if based on that logic, Ken Knapsack would have been the number 1 seed, which I think if you interviewed most players and be like, who's the most dangerous person in Star Wars in this moment, I don't think a lot of people would put Ken Knapsack in there, just because of his losing streak, because of how dangerous Laura Kelly looked. Also, Joseph Scrimshaw's in that tournament, and he can make an argument because he beat Knapsack. But like, it's interesting. I think what happened is Knapsack got the 1 seed just because he's the only one that was a former champion out of everyone else.
I think that's probably right.
So, but then you look at,
I don't understand this. And looking at the matchups again for this round, I don't understand what the seeding was for this tournament.
I think really this felt like I understand Scrimshaw versus Demolanta, because you make the argument.
That one makes sense.
The ones that don't make sense is Laura Kelly versus Sean Sullivan and Molly Damon versus Adam Witt. Like, those ones, no matter how much I think about.
I kind of understand the Adam Witt and Molly Damon one. They had the exact same record. They were both 0-1.
I get what you
understand
mean.
that matchup.
I think that matchup would make sense if we didn't have a Laura Kelly versus Sean Sullivan matchup on because like, you basically, the way I think about it is like, okay, Laura Kelly's the higher seed because she has proven her merit. Even though she's 1 and 2, she has shown a lot of promise in the Star Wars division. And you're looking at Sean Sullivan's perspective. His opening match, he won against Adam Witt. So what does he get for winning against Adam Witt? Going against Laura Kelly. Wow, Adam Witt, what does he get for losing that match? He goes against Molly, and it's not that Molly Damon's an easy opponent, and we see it with Molly beating Adam Witt. It's more so that
Molly definitely was not an easy opponent.
No, absolutely not. It's more, what I'm saying is that like Laura Kelly was the more experienced, clearly, like if you were doing a seeding, if I were seeding the tournament, Laura Kelly would be my number 1 seed. She was my favorite to win the tournament. But it was just interesting how the seeding went. Like, I feel bad for Sullivan because I feel like Sullivan got a brutal first round matchup where it's like, oh, the person that you want to face the least, you can get in the first round. It's just brutal.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like I said, the seeding doesn't make sense to me.
I think what you have to accept about Schmoedown seeding, and I've thought a lot about Schmoedown seeding because I used to write articles about like trying to predict Schmoedown seeding and stuff like that. Is like there's going to be at least 1 to 2 matchups that don't make sense just because of scheduling, and
That's true.
and like it's not going to be 100 because like the way I would think it is, it's like 60% ranking, 35% entertainment, where it's like, okay, we can fudge the seats a little if it's a bit more entertaining, and then 5% schedules. And I think like the Star Wars tournament is the 5% schedules. But going into the first,
I'd agree with that because I mean this was live on Twitch, so like the schedule had to be the schedule. So yeah, okay,
absolutely. And so I'll ask, how did you feel heading into this first round? Watching this first round, do you have any vivid memories of this first round?
I was really excited, specifically for the Scrimshaw versus Demolanta and Knapsack versus Cabrera matchups. Not that I wasn't excited for the other matchups, but those two in particular really stood out to me. Andres and Ken, of course, used to co-host Jedi Council on Collider. It was like the master versus the Padawan in that matchup, so to speak. And Scrimshaw is just dangerous. I mean, his record in the end doesn't really show it, but he was a very dangerous opponent. And Andrew Demolanta had not yet really shown his true potential to be the champion that he ended up being. So, but he had put enough of an impression on me that I really enjoyed watching him play, and I thought his matchup with Scrimshaw would be very even, which it did turn out to be.
Absolutely, and I think the way my favorite match by far is the Scrimshaw versus Demolanta match. That was an awesome match. Both competitors played awesome, and it came down to the very end in the last moment in a very interesting way. And after that like match, I was like, oh, Demolanta's. I felt after that match, this was my feelings on the first round. Oh, Demolanta's going to win the tournament because it felt like in that match he almost exercised those demons because like he would get so close previously, but just in the end, something would go wrong and he'd miss it. And it felt like, oh, he gets so close and he finally passed the edge. So I was like, oh, Demolanta looks awesome. He beat one of the favorites to win the tournament, in my opinion. I think like after the first round, I'm like, oh, Demolanta was looking very dangerous. Molly Damon was great in her match against Adam Witt. I was like, oh, that's going to be an awesome matchup, Damon versus Demolanta, which we get a lot more Damon versus Demolanta matchups after this tournament, but this is the first Damon versus Demolanta matchup, which is something to notice. And then on the other side, Laura Kelly looked awesome. She dominant and Andres kept impressing. He kept improving. I was like, I actually thought I thought after I saw him beat Quevedo and how composed he was, and like, oh, he's going to get better. I did think he was going to beat Knapsack. I didn't think he was going to beat Laura Kelly. But another thing to quickly notice about this division is I think Sean Sullivan is the only competitor that has a record above 50%. And that just shows you the state of the Star Wars division going into this tournament, where it's like even the top competitors, where it's Laura Kelly, Ken Knapsack, Joseph Scrimshaw, all do not have records above 500 in this division. And I think that shows the state of Star Wars as we begin this tournament. And then we'll talk about the state of Star Wars at the end of this tournament. But at the beginning of this tournament, it's like you have these great competitors, but none of them win more than they lose in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Alex Damon was such a dominant champion and the Star Wars division was so small for so long, it really played into the fact that everybody was going to have a terrible record but Alex. Because you'd win a match or you'd win a 3-way or whatever to get to a championship match against Alex, and then you'd lose.
Yes.
And because of the fact that they did a lot of 5-person matches, 4-person matches, in the Star Wars division, a lot of people got losses that maybe they wouldn't have gotten in a one-on-one match.
And it would just be so infrequent in a way. Like the matches were just so infrequent, so you didn't have the chance to get the 50% really.
Yeah, like we were talking about just before the show started, these are the bulk of the Star Wars matches for this year. There are only 2 other Star Wars matches in season 7, and that's the one done in February between Adam Witt and Sean Sullivan that Sean Sullivan won, and then the championship match is spectacular between Alex Damon and Andres Cabrera.
Absolutely. Heading into round 2, we have Andrew DiMolanta versus Molly Damon and Laura Kelly versus Andres Cabrera. And
Yeah.
both matches really excited for. And DiMolanta beats Damon. I wasn't as surprised about that one. I was shocked that Andres Cabrera beat Laura Kelly in that match.
I was kind of shocked about that too. Laura seemed really ready to be in this tournament, and I think what she screwed up was Anakin Skywalker's age, if I have
Yeah,
memory serves.
I believe
And
so.
as a child, when he meets Padme, I believe is the question. And Andres answered it. Laura didn't. It ended up being the pivotal 2 points in the match. And but that was a very good match. I thought both the semifinals were actually really good matches.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very compelling. Like I feel like Laura Kelly was the one like out of the veterans who you expected to do well in this tournament, because DeMolante's
Mhm.
0-2 heading into this tournament. Molly Damon's 0-1 heading into this tournament. And Andres is 0-0, but he was coming off that big Robert Parker loss. It's like
Yeah.
if you looked at that moment, it was tough to believe anyone had a perfect bracket after Laura Kelly lost, in a sense. And like that's I think what gave this tournament and gave the final such an energy of excitement in a way that was like oh my, this was a completely unexpected match. We have a new rising superstar, whether it's Demolanta or Andres. And I think Star Wars needed that, because you can't just keep doing the same thing and being like, oh, well, but they're going to lose Alex Damon. The fact that
Yeah.
Demolanta and Andres were new and exciting and were getting better, there was a point where it's like, oh, maybe they do beat Alex Damon heading into it.
Yep.
And I'll also say, faction wise, this is very important for the faction race.
Yes.
These 4 factions, if you look at it. I think the
Yeah.
Star Wars tournament, you can look back on it and like it's crucial to the faction race, because the exchange is already on an extreme hot streak at this moment, because Dan Murrell and Ben Bateman just had the title match, and Murrell was able to do it in the end. And like if they win the Star Wars tournament, the streak just keeps going, and Swag is trying to keep up with the exchange in any way. So
Mhm.
I believe Molly Damon is on the is she Dungeon or Suspects at this?
She was Usual Suspects.
Yeah, she was Suspects, and Laura Kelly
Was
was
Corruption.
Corruption. Yes. Oh, and Corruption. So there you go. Like that, and another thing we didn't talk about. This was Laura Kelly's moment in the dark side, if you will, by being in Corruption, and I thought she
Yeah.
played that very, very well.
I agree. I loved Laura when she was in Corruption. I just love Laura, period. I think she's
Mm,
fantastic. And I loved her when she came to Corruption, and she got that edge about her that, she didn't necessarily have before. And I was I looking back on it, like I really expected her to beat Andres. Nothing against Andres, but Laura's just that type of competitor in Star Wars, and I wish that we could have kept going and got to see her win that belt, because I knew she'd do it someday. But yeah, the semifinals were really good.
yes, the semifinals were really good. And like going into the finals, how are you feeling? Because we just witnessed the Andres upset versus Laura Kelly. We have
Mhm.
Demolanta versus Ace. How are you feeling about the finals? Who did you think was going to win? Like what level of excitement were you? What were the
Oh, I
feelings
was
going
very
into the
excited.
finals?
I was very excited for this match. This match, I believe, is the one that ended up on the front page of Twitch, and we had 15,000 people watching at one point, which is really cool. Um, I didn't know who was gonna win this match. I wanted, Andrew to win the match because 'cause I'm a big Andrew DeMolanta fan, but I wasn't gonna be upset if Ace won the match either, because I think Ace is great. Um, and so we had a really interesting matchup. Andrew was on, a hot streak. Andres was on a hot streak. Something was gonna change it, but it was gonna be an epic match, and it ended up being an epic match.
Absolutely. Like it lived up to the hype. Like and that's what the was so great about the Star Wars tournament in general. It felt like every match kind of lived up to the amount of hype it had going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one had a lot of hype. I mean, it sorry about that. But
No problem.
that both of them played basically perfect, and what it came down to is what's so good about the Schmoedown in a way. It's the 5-pointer that it came down to the end. It's like you can play as good as you can, like you can as long as you're within that 5 points. It's anyone's game, and that's what happened
Yeah.
in the end. Is Demolanta just missed his 5-pointer?
Mm-hmm. He had a really tough 5-pointer, if I remember correctly. I don't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, Andrew missed his 5-pointer. He was devastated after this. I remember. Um, I don't know why Christian made the decision that the loser of the tournament would be the number one contender to whoever won between Ace and Alex in at Spectacular. But I'm glad he did because Andrew DeMolanta deserves something for his performance in this tournament. He just got a brutal question for a 5-pointer and couldn't answer it.
That's the nature of the Schmoedown. It's the double-sidedness, if you will, where it's like you can play as well as you can. You can play perfect, perfect, perfect. But in the end, if you get the wrong 5-pointer, you pick the wrong number in your round 3
Yeah,
numbers. I mean, it's why we love the game and why we believe anyone can win, and why there's also bitterness about it as well. But Andres played absolutely incredible in that match. It
he
was
did.
also a huge win, I think, for the league. The fact that the exchange was stacking up those victories so close
Mhm.
together that it felt like, oh, the exchange
Yeah,
got this on lockdown. It's a huge win for Swag for the faction race.
absolutely. I mean, like you said earlier, this tournament played a big part in the faction race by the end of the year. Um, I don't know the points off the top of my head, but if Andres had won, I mean, if Andrew had won this tournament, it would have made things a little more interesting with corruption and the exchange at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Um, but congratulations to Andres for going on a run like nothing we've ever seen before in Star Wars until we saw Thomas Harper.
One of the greatest, maybe you could argue the greatest underdog story within the
Yeah.
Schmoedown was his run in the tournament. It really felt like he was in the playing game, and he was able to go from the playing game to the winning the tournament. There's not a lot when it comes to sports in general. There's not a lot of teams that ever go from playing game to winner. It's like there's
Yeah.
a very low list, and when we're just talking about all sports in general.
I can't
Especially
think
like
of one off the top of my head.
the only one I can think of is when the playing game was added with the NBA. The Lakers, I
Mhm.
believe, technically was a play-in team when they, and also the Heat made the finals, but they never won as a play because last year they were a play-in and they beat the Bucks as a 1 seed. But
Yeah, but then
uh,
lost to the Nuggets.
yeah, so but I can't think of it in the college basketball.
Yeah,
I
I don't
can't.
think it's ever happened in college basketball.
I don't think so either. Like I mean,
It's a
and
very rare feat to go from a playing game to the champion of the tournament.
absolutely, and that's what made this tournament so exciting is to see that underdog story be realized in a way. And both of them, Andrew Demolata was 0-2 heading into this tournament.
Mhm.
Andres was 0-0, but he was coming off the devastating loss, and you just watch both of
Yeah.
them just kick ass and absolutely do an incredible job. And what once we go into what this tournament did for the Star Wars division in general, it gave us so much more competitors that felt dangerous. It gave us Ace, who was a great story to root for the rest of his career just because of this run. We
Mhm.
got Molly Damon got her first win here. Laura Kelly still, it's like still a great competitor, and then um, Andrew DeMolanta. Without this tournament, I don't know if Andrew DeMolanta ever goes from 0-2 to champion. I
Yeah.
think I think I truly believe because to go from 0-2 to a champion, you need to go to a run like this, and the tournament's the easiest way to do this. And if he
Mhm.
loses a scrimshaw, which was very could have easily happened based on how close that match was. you'd be 0-3. It's almost impossible to go from 0-3 to a champion. So the fact that
Yeah.
he needed this run and he got it, and he almost got it to the title match. He was just a step close in that 5-pointer.
Yeah. Andrew DiMolanta, this was the emergence of him becoming the champion that he was about to be. Ace never was the champion, but he played a pretty good championship match against Alex at Spectacular. They were both tremendous competitors in this division, and I enjoyed watching them all the time, no matter where they ended up doing. And like you're right, like Laura Kelly, like I said earlier, it's a shame she never held the belt.
Yeah, it really is. And like Ace after this tournament does have a rough time because I believe his next match is against Sean Sullivan, which he wins, but then he
Yeah.
loses against Thomas Harper, and he loses against, I think, Nikki DiMolanta.
Let's look real quick. I'm not sure. Did he play in that second tournament? Yeah, he did. He lost to Nikki DiMolanta. You're right. So, that was not in that second tournament in 2021. That was actually in season 9. He lost to
It's
Nikki
a number one
DiMolanta in
contender
a
match,
number one
right?
contender match. Yeah. That was after Harper had vacated the belt, and there were
Yeah.
the 2 number 1 contender matches. Yeah. Star Wars changed forever, I think, with this tournament. I think Christian saw what the Star Wars division could become. He saw the excitement people had for the matches and the players that maybe they hadn't seen before, and I think that's why Star Wars was vastly expanded for season 8.
Absolutely. It was one of
And
those things. Sorry to interrupt. I was just quickly
uh,
going to say
no,
the
go ahead.
tournament created so much fan excitement for Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like I think if there was a chart, you could see the clear like rocket jump of before and after the Star Wars tournament.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say it's a shame that Star Wars and went so big in season 8 and then got so diminished in season 9, and I will never understand that.
I mean,
But,
I think Star Wars as a division itself is such an interesting division because those questions are so specific and you have to go so deep, and there's
yeah.
so much. It's like there's so much stuff you have to study in a way, and like it's a division that like I understand. Like I understand why there never was as many matches. It's because
Mhm.
there's such a limited amount of questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's only so much you can go before you reach the bottom of the barrel in a way, and it was so
Yeah.
tough to stump any of these players. That's why, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. That's why there's a lot of talk about expanding and adding TV, Star Wars TV, and possibly adding. I don't know if there's talk about adding books. I definitely remember adding stuff like The Mandalorian and stuff like that. I was curious to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts about that, and as a Star Wars fan.
I would have thought that would have been really interesting. As I think you could do it with something like the Star Wars shows because they're so limited. They're not like a TV series that has 22 episodes a year and there's 15 seasons of it. That would be really difficult to do unless you did a league just for that series. You know what I mean? Um, I would have been fine if they put the Star Wars TV shows on there. I know Laura Kelly was pretty adamant that she never wanted to watch Star Wars Resistance again. So she was probably arguing against that. But I would have made the division interesting if they had kept it as big as it was. I think it would have refreshed the questions in the division and it would have made it very interesting.
I think it also allows for at least some easier questions, where
Yeah.
it's like and there could be some strategy where it's like if you choose the movies, you know what type of questions you're getting. But if you choose the TV shows, you get more surface level, possibly questions. And like I think that would have been an interesting dynamic. I was for it, but I completely understand the competitors who were like, I already have enough to study within this small
Yeah.
sample
Yeah.
size. Adding to my amount of stuff I have to study is just too much. It's too much.
Yeah, I can understand that, but then you think about singles players who have to know general knowledge on so
Everything.
many movies that, it's not as specific, but sometimes they did get pretty specific in the singles questions as well. I think they did, if I'm recalling correctly, trial the TV stuff in the First Class League, in the
Yeah,
Star Wars division.
that sounds right. The First Class League was a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways, where it just tries
Yeah.
stuff, a lot of interesting stuff in my Like a First Class League is an episode within itself, but I
we'll have to do an episode on the First Class League.
Absolutely. But just to go back to the singles, I think you could have convinced the Star Wars competitors if there was a complete understanding that, hey, the TV show stuff is, until we get to that bottom of the barrel, it's going to be the question difficulty for the TV stuff is not going to be the same difficulty compared to the Star Wars stuff. And I think that would have created some interesting strategies, but that was the Star Wars tournament. And we started having those conversations after the Star Wars tournament because of how much excitement that came from it. And I believe we had a couple of Star Wars tournaments after this, but
we did. We had the 2 Star Wars tournaments in
yes.
season 8.
Yes.
Those were pretty fascinating as well.
Yes.
Yeah, this Star Wars tournament changed, I think, everything. This division was probably my favorite division to watch. It wasn't my favorite division to play along with because I would never be able to answer most of these questions. But just the sheer amount of knowledge, specific knowledge on display from these competitors was very impressive, and I enjoy watching Star Wars matches a lot.
Absolutely. And I think like this is also a changing point of the era, if you will. For example, like the Alex Damon era is clear. It's the and sorry, I just have to let my dog out. So give me one
it's okay. The Alex Damon era was definitely the beginning of the Star Wars division, truly. There was the Sam Witwer era, there was the Ken Knapsack era, and then there was the Alex Damon era. But I think Alex Damon's was the first real, true, impressionable era in Star Wars.
Absolutely. We have Damon, and then we have Demolanta, and then Harper, and then back to Demolanta, I believe.
Yeah, because he won it at the final spectacular. So
I believe so. But it's like it really felt like we were in this Damon era for so long, and this was like the first breath of fresh air where it's like, oh my god, it's like
this was definitely the first time I felt like, okay, we have challengers for Alex.
Yes,
because everybody else was good, but when they went up against Alex, it was like not even comparable. This was the first time I thought, okay, we have somebody between Andres and Andrew who I think could actually legitimately take the belt off Alex.
Absolutely.
And that's what Andrew ended up doing.
Yes.
All right. Any final thoughts, Josh?
I think we've said a lot, as much as we can, about the Star Wars tournament. I mean, there's and like looking back on it, like it was nice to remember. Oh, right, I remember Dark Side Laura Kelly and Laura Kelly and Corruption. It was nice to remember Sean Sullivan and Adam Witt and Molly Damon. And, like, we talked so much; it so dominated the conversation about Demolanta and Andres. But it's nice to maybe take a moment and be like, oh, right, what also made it was all these other competitors who maybe didn't make the end or didn't make the run, gave it their all, and were so entertaining and just so fun to watch. And that's really also what breathed a lot of life in the Star Wars, is that, like, now you also had competitors like Molly Damon, Adam Witt, Sean Sullivan, that all felt like, oh, okay, like this is the start of something. If they can maybe take the next step forward or improve, they're already fun to watch. If they can just like increase their accuracy like by 5 or 10%, then they might be able to get there.
Yeah, and Adam Witt, just one final thought on Adam Witt from me. Never won a match in the Schmoedown, but was one of the most entertaining competitors to watch. And I always appreciated that about him.
Absolutely.
Even in the Star Wars when it was tense and the knowledge was very deep. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this month's episode. Sorry we missed last month. Things got a little out of hand. I was on vacation. There was a lot of stuff going on. But we will be back next month.
Well, we did the beginning of February, right?
It was, yeah, but that was January's episode. So
yeah, gotcha.
It's basically been 2 months since we put out an episode. But we will be back next month with another episode. Josh, where can people find you?
You can find me here on LGR. I'm basically doing the nostalgia crackdown. So like support LGR, support the Patreon, support Adelia, and LGR is a great community. So any way you support LGR is supporting me.
Yeah, and you can support LGR by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/LGR_network. $1 a month gets you into the Discord. A little bit more a month gets you some perks that otherwise you wouldn't get from the dollar tier. We're real grateful for anybody who throws any support our way. So just liking this video and subscribing to the channel would really be a very good help as well. You can find me on this channel every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, on the Rewatchers Council with Snark and sometimes Ferris, reviewing every 144 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And you can find me on our Highlights Sports channel every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, on Starting 11, the English Premier League recap show that I do with Snark. And everything else that I was on, I'm taking a step back from at the moment because life's gotten a little too hectic. But we'll be back. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month.
It's for real.